We will now go ahead and begin our media availabilities with driver of the number 4 Mobile 1 Ford for Stewart-Haas Racing. We're joined by Kevin Harvick. Thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open it up to questions from the media. Please raise your hand, and we will get a mic over to you as soon as possible. We'll go ahead in the back.
Hi, Kevin. Taylor DeSormo with MLive.com. Last week at Watkins Glen, there was a lot of beating and banging. When you think about drivers who might be most willing to punch you or kind of door slam you this weekend, who comes to mind?
No one.
Why is that?
I didn't have any issues last week, so I don't really, have anything like that that's even on my mind.
We'll come down here to Bob.
Bob Hawkers, Fox Sports. I know you haven't been on the track, but they did add some of the PJ1 here, which is the first time for an ISC track. Do you think will anybody go try it? And if they do, will it not be till tomorrow?
I think it's obviously something that everybody's been talking about, and as you look at it, it's probably a little high for today. And I think the biggest holdback in it is Goodyear, just concerned with the speeds, but you're wide open in lane 2 and lane 1, for the most part. So I don't think lane 3 would be an issue. I think they're trying to ease into it, to make sure there are no issues. I don't think we'll ever get to lane 5. I think everybody from a driver's side wants to see lane 3 be usable with this particular package, so that you have the bottom and you have lane 3. Those are really the two biggest concerns. But you have to be able to run in it, and I think NASCAR and ISC have done a great job in what they've done. And I think the biggest hurdle in the whole thing is appeasing Goodyear.
That's too much. If you're going too much.
I mean, if you're wide open in lane 2 and you're wide open in lane 3, I don't think there's going to be really any load differences, in my opinion. But obviously, they have something on their mind that might be different than what I'm thinking about. But I think from a NASCAR ISC standpoint and the way it was laid down, I think that everybody probably thinks it needs to be in lane 3 to get it going, because you're going to have to get cars in lane 3. But I think Goodyear's the biggest hurdle.
We'll come down here to your left.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. MIS was notoriously a multi-groove track and went to single. Did you guys see anything in June or in any practice sessions that think you might be able to get more 2 or 3 wide racing?
I think the race was one of the better races that we've seen here in a long time. So, I think everybody's first time doing the PJ1. Everybody's concerned about trying to do it as good as possible with everything that we've learned from the different racetracks. We all know that the PJ1 and opening up the lanes is what we need. Lane 3 is not going to be usable unless people run in it, and it's just never been burned in. And until you get cars burning that lane in, it's really going to take some time. So, I think as you see what happens in the truck race tomorrow, I think that'll give us a better idea of where it's at. I don't think nobody's going to use lane 5. That's just not going to. I don't see that's happening, especially in our cars where you're in the trucks this weekend that are virtually wide open. But I think if you had lane 1 and lane 3, if the preferred groove was lane 1, you had lane 2. So everybody's, from a driver's side of things, is looking for lane 3 to be functional. And I think that once that happens, it's going to happen, because I think once we see the effort's already been put in, everybody knows where we're headed. But I think Goodyear just wants to see that it's eased into it to make sure that they have no problems. So the speeds are drastically slower than they have been in the past. So it's just not the same as the loads and the speeds that they're used to. So it's just going to take a little bit of time to make sure it's not overdone, so that everybody's just not doesn't have those concerns. But I think we're headed that way of having more lanes. It's going to happen.
We'll come down here to Lee.
Lee Spencer, RacingPoints.com. You finished first or second here, 7 of the last 11 races. What do you attribute your success to as far as getting around this track?
Just fast cars. I think as you look at Stewart-Haas Racing as a whole, we've only won one of those races. we feel like we could have done better than that. Just things happen. It's hard to win these races, but it's been a great racetrack for us, and it fits a lot of the things that our organization does. We ran well here at the first race, so it's just been a good racetrack for us. Obviously, there's a lot of effort that everybody puts in. It's very important to Ford, and having Joey win the first race here is a good thing for Ford. So those are the same goals this weekend, and hopefully we can get one of our Stewart-Haas racing cars in victory lane.
And of the races that are remaining between now and the playoffs, is Bristol really the one wild card? Because, I mean, all kinds of nonsense can happen there.
We can have nonsense happen anywhere. Today's world, the way you race and all the things that happen, and as hard as it is to pass. And I think you saw a lot of frustration last week, from other guys, and you have to take chances and do things that you wouldn't have done over the past several years in order to make something happen. So it's just different than it used to be.
Come over here to Dustin.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. I guess kind of on that topic is your moral compass or driver's moral compass. How has that had to change with, I know blocking's been around, but with the increase in blocking or some of the things that you have to do, how has your moral compass changed on the track? Or
you just have to understand that it's going to happen. You have to know that you're going to have to block. You're going to get blocked. There's going to be things that happen, and I think as you've seen, the aggression level has hiked up in what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and the retaliation and the things that have happened. So it's a different world. It's kind of like sitting in here is much different than it was 5 years ago, and how you guys operate. The way we operate on a racetrack has just evolved into something totally different as to what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. It's just an evolution that has changed the things that you do, and the things that you like and don't like are irrelevant at this point. It's just it's a nature of the beast and the way that you have to do things.
so in that stance, as it builds, is there a sense that there's going to be a line crossed, or something's going to have to be done to rein you guys in, or rein drivers in at that point? Or how does that, because it sounds like it's building. Is there a point where it's going to cross a line?
I think you've seen a lot of these things already happen at the super speedway races. So it's I think a lot of times you have to test the boundaries, and everybody's testing the boundaries to see what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, how far you can push somebody, how far you can't push somebody, and all that stuff has a funny way of cycling itself around to everybody understanding what's good and what's bad.
We'll go right here in the middle and then all the way in the back to Wolfgang.
Vedant here, President Global Kid Media. You played a lot of sports growing up, football, basketball, baseball. You did wrestling in high school. What do you think it was that really sparked your interest in NASCAR and racing so much, knowing in 5th grade that this is what you wanted to do? And do you think it had anything to do with your dad being so involved in that community?
I started when I got my first go-kart when I was 5. So racing was before other sports. The only reason I played other sports is because it was during the off time of the racing season. For me, I grew up around cars, and just happened to be better at driving than I was athletic. So I enjoyed other sports, and wrestling was still the best thing that I ever did in my childhood, just because I had great coaches and great mentors, and learned a lot about myself along the way, and I think mentally that helped my racing career. But I was always better at racing than I was everything else.
Going back to Wolfgang.
Kevin, your team is involved in 2 different worlds of motor racing, NASCAR and F1. Also, that's totally different from each other. Is there some input from the F1 engineers with some fresh ideas to the NASCAR world?
That would be that would probably be a better question for Greg Zipadelli, because I don't know 100% that answer.
We'll go right over here to your right.
Kevin, you mentioned a couple times things on the track being acceptable or not acceptable. Can you explain what is okay and is understandable and acceptable and what isn't? Like when does a driver cross the line on the track or off?
I think everybody's going to think about it differently. How I think about it is probably best that I just think about it that way. I'm going to do whatever I have to do for my team to be successful.
We'll wrap up right here with Alan.
Alan Cavana, Fox Sports. What keeps you mentally tough? You know, we see incidents like last week with other drivers, and they may get revenge or try to do something out on the racetrack or go crazy on the radio. I feel like we don't see a lot of that from you. What keeps you mentally tough?
I like my team, you know, and I've screwed so many things up in my career that, you know, I feel like it's evolved into what it is today. The radio button is poison because you guys just take it and exploit it. And you know, that's just bad. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for communication. It's bad for the way that it gets exposed. It's bad for anything that comes out of it in the things that you say. And for me, every time I push that button, I try to think about more or less who's listening. And I know my son's listening. And you know, you remember that those guys that you're talking to are all on your team. And in the end, there's nothing good that comes out of yelling on the radio. And I've yelled as much as anybody on the radio through the years. But, you know, over the last 6 years, that's been something that Rodney and I have really focused on to really just try to eliminate, which I feel like we basically have, you know, eliminated the radio piece of it and keep as close to your vest as possible as to what you think, how you think, the things that you do. And you know, from a mental standpoint, there's very little that's going to get my attention, you know. And you have to have a short memory. You have to let things roll off, win or lose. You have to be over it by Monday. You have to move on to the next week. It's just there's too many moving parts and pieces, and too many things that I can affect in the things that I say and the things that I do. And being involved in my team is still the most important thing that I can do. And disrupting that and having to have, you know, somebody answer questions about things I said or things I did is really a waste of time. And so, you know, I'm still going to screw up and say something that I shouldn't say or do something that I shouldn't do. But for the most part, we try to eliminate all that. And you know, if there's something that needs to be handled, you try to base it on things that you've done in the past. But you know, from a mental standpoint, there's really not much that's going to bother me.
And that'll wrap us up.